"Natalia, calm down," said James. "Why are you making a fuss over someone as worthless as he is?" Pearl feigned a silly smile and said, "It's nothing. I just don't want to clink glasses with a loser. Is there a problem with that?" "Who you want to drink with and who you don't want to drink with is your choice. But you could at least show a bit of respect," Natalia snapped. "You don't seem to have been brought up with good manners." Pearl's expression changed. She slammed the table, stood up, and glared at Natalia. "I saw that you didn't like me the moment you came in here," she said coldly. "I should be the one asking you a few questions. I know you pretend to be doing well in your career, and you look down on me. But I heard that the Philly group is on the verge of bankruptcy and is laying people off. You're out of work now, aren't you? So how can you act so high and mighty?" Pearl's words were filled with hatred, and Natalia's dislike of her was also turning into hatred. Fraser looked down and had a cold glint in his eyes. Bullying was something he could tolerate, but someone bullying his own wife was out of the question. Natalia was about to reply when Dorothy asked, "Natalia, are you out of work? Why didn't you tell us about such an important thing?" Hostess said, "How could she still have the nerve to speak to Pearl like that? She's not going to find another job easily. Who would want to take her on?" Natalia's heart ached as she listened to the conversation. She pursed her lips to prevent herself from crying. Most people's fathers would think about how to comfort their children in such a difficult situation, she thought. But with him, all I get is mockery and ridicule. And he's even doing it in front of an outsider who was arguing with me. As she thought about it, she felt chills run down her spine. "I'm sorry to disappoint you," she said to her father. Fraser embraced her gently and said, "Natalia isn't unemployed." Pearl snorted and said, "Are you joking? You're not going to tell us that she didn't lose her job and got promoted instead, are you?" Fraser smiled and said, "Natalia, you're too secretive. Why didn't you tell your family that you changed jobs?" "What? She changed jobs?" said Hostess. "Yeah," Fraser said. "My wife is very capable. She's found a job at the Robster Corporation and has been there for several days." For a moment, the entire room was silent. Hostess was secretly impressed, though he didn't show it. "You guys are underestimating us," said Fraser. "Natalia, if you don't want to eat, then let's go home." "What do you mean?" asked James. "This is my family's dinner. You can't leave before finishing your meal. That would be disrespecting Pearl." As he said that, he felt a chill coming from Fraser's side. He looked into Fraser's eyes and decided not to speak anymore. Fraser looked as though he would beat him if he said one more word. Natalia pushed her husband's hand away and shook her head. "Forget it," she said. Hostess didn't pay any more attention to her. He and Dorothy started to focus on Pearl again. James also began to fawn over his fiancée. For a moment, Pearl felt like she was being pampered like a little princess. As for Natalia, she seemed to be the complete opposite. Like Cinderella hiding in a corner with no one paying any attention to her. Even though she could see that Natalia had already admitted defeat, Pearl still showed no signs of stopping. "It's more important to marry into a good family," she said while looking at Natalia. "Although James doesn't have much ability, he at least has a home. What about you, Natalia? I heard that you don't even have a decent car. I don't know why you married such a useless husband." Natalia was about to explode. "You're going too far," she shouted. Dorothy jumped up. "Shut up, Natalia! Are you trying to make me angry?" Natalia stared at her mother, tears in her eyes, but she didn't respond. Seeing that her future sister-in-law had been humiliated, Pearl felt even more proud of herself. "Natalia, when I move into the Laplace house, I will still welcome you and Lynn as guests," she said. When she spoke, she heavily emphasized the word guests, as if declaring her sovereignty. Natalia's tears were flowing down her cheeks and dripping onto her plate. "Don't cry, Natalia," said James. "It's the first time you've met your sister-in-law. It should be a happy occasion."
"Nat, are you all right?"
whispered Lynn.
"Just pretend you didn't hear her. The meal's almost over now."
The scene made Frasier livid, but he tried not to show the extent of his anger. He looked at his watch. It was 5:29, which meant it was almost time. His phone rang. He looked at the caller ID and immediately pressed the answer button. "Hello, Mr. Macklemore? I'm your new vehicle consultant. Your new car's arrived at the entrance of the restaurant as you requested, and all your orders have been carried out. Is there anything else I can do for you?" "There's nothing more," said Frasier. "I'll put in a good word for you with your manager." He hung up and saw everyone in the room staring at him curiously. Pearl laughed out loud and said, "How would he be putting in a good word to someone's manager? That's just laughable." "Tell me, Frasier, how much business did you do with the person on the phone? Don't tell me that it was $1 million. Frasier smiled and said casually, "No, it wasn't that much. Just $350,000. She laughed even harder and said, "I'm dying of laughter. Do you even know what $350,000 is? If you had that kind of money, why would you stay with the Laplace family and be so submissive?" Dorothy couldn't sit still any longer. She slammed the table and stood up.
"Frasier, what is all this about?"
she demanded.
"Stop playing games."
Natalia also looked at Frasier and wished that he would be more forthright. "All right, it's getting late, and the meal was very enjoyable," said James, who could see that the safest thing to do was to wind up the evening. "I hope that we can all gather like this again in the future." He then looked at Frasier and said, "Frasier, what are you doing sitting there? Why aren't you opening the door for everyone?" James didn't treat Frasier as a family member, but ordered him around like a servant. Frasier didn't say anything, but stood up to casually open the door.
"Unbelievable! He's so obedient," muttered Pearl.
James led the way as they left the room one by one. Frasier just smiled. "I've let these people show off. And now, it's my turn to have some fun," he thought. When Natalia passed Frasier, she sighed. She was disappointed in him and felt that he had become useless again. It seemed to her that all his previous power had just been an illusion. When the two of them got downstairs, they saw Pearl sitting in the back of a cool-looking car. The consultant was trying to dissuade her from sitting there.
"My God!" she exclaimed. "There must be a rich man eating here. Why didn't I see him? James, I want one of these too."
She looked toward the restaurant, but Frasier was blocking the entrance.
"Get out of my way," she demanded. "I want to see the owner of this gorgeous car."
"I'm sorry, but that car is mine," said Frasier.
"Yours? Dream on, loser. This car is worth more than $300,000, she said.
James also mocked him. "Frasier, you've spent almost all the money you made selling those properties, so how could you still have the money to buy even a beat-up old wreck, let alone a car like this?" Natalia's parents also felt that it was laughable, and they criticized their son-in-law for pretending to own the car. At that moment, someone said, "Excuse me, are you Mr. Macklemore?" The consultant had heard James mention Frasier's name. "I am. Mr. Macklemore, I'm your vehicle consultant.
I called you just now. Here's the key. She's all yours.
Before Fraser could get his hands on it, Earl stood in front of the man and said,
You must be mistaken. We all know this person, and he's just a hopeless loser who lives in a fantasy world.
No, I'm not mistaken, the man insisted. Mr. Wilson of the Robster Corporation specifically asked me to deliver this car to Mr. Macklemore, he said solemnly. The group looked at each other at the mention of that name. Even they weren't qualified to meet him, let alone Fraser. However, looking at the consultant's expression, it didn't seem like he was joking at all.
To watch the full episode, install the Pocket FM app